Caleb from Team Retro, where we like retro games and the devices that bring them to us. And this is the ASUS ROG Ally. Last year, I thought the Steam Deck was going to be the only gaming device I would ever need. 1 year later, here is the ASUS ROG Ally. In this video, we're going to find out if this device is truly the Steam Deck killer. So let's dive in and let's get to work. Alright, let's jump on our mount here and head into Spec Town. The ASUS ROG Ally has an AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme CPU capable of 8 cores and 16 threads. The GPU is an AMD RDNA 3 and you have 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5 RAM on board. The device comes with 512 gigabytes plus a micro SD slot, and this is all in an M.2 2230 NVMe SSD, and this is user upgradable. The star of the show is going to be the ASUS ROG Ally's 7-inch diagonal IPS touchscreen display. Now this outputs at 1920 by 1080 at a 16:9 aspect ratio, but it is capable of a 120 Hz refresh rate. You have Bluetooth 5.2 and Wi-Fi 6 on board, and a 40 watt-hour battery, which is the same battery that's in the Steam Deck. You have one USB-C port with video out, and the device is capable with ASUS's line of eGPUs, which could give you an extra boost in docked mode. Now let's do some comparisons to this device's greatest competition, which is the Steam Deck. And we're going to start by putting the two devices side by side to take a look at the screen. Now both of these devices are at 50% brightness and there are no plugins or enhancements making the picture quality better. And if you put the two devices side by side like this, you'll notice that the Ally just looks slightly brighter and has a little bit better color. Now, I am by no means a screen expert. I like both of these screens equally at 60 Hz refresh rate, but I find that at 120 Hz refresh rate, the Ally screen really comes out on top and offers some super smooth pictures and gameplay. However, as is the case with these x86 Windows handhelds, power comes at the cost of efficiency. So you're going to find that even though this device is capable of a 120 Hz refresh rate, you're not always going to want to strive for that because you're going to want to find a balance between performance and battery life. And so what this screen is going to offer instead is a super stable 60 frames per second and some really smooth looking gameplay. And so I found during my testing that there was never any need to drop the refresh rate down to 60 Hz because even if I wasn't striving for 120 Hz refresh rate, I was still getting a better picture overall than if I dropped the refresh rate of the screen. And I found that the refresh rate would be great for cutscenes, but then when I transitioned into actual gameplay, the FPS would dip more typically into the 60 frames or 30 frames per second range for PC games. Now let's go ahead and do some other comparisons. We're going to pull out a new tool that I just got. I guess they call this thing a caliper, and I've seen other YouTubers use this to measure button size as well as thickness. So we're going to nickname this tool Cali. And so if you take a look at Cali on the face buttons on the Steam Deck, you'll see that they are about 8.8 millimeters thick. Well, the D-pad is about 7.6 millimeters thick on the tip of each direction. And with the D-brand case on, we're looking at about 25 millimeters of thickness. Now the buttons on the ROG Ally are a lot bigger at 10.2 millimeters, and it's kind of hard to get a gauge on the D-pad because it's a circle pad, but the tips at the top here come in at 6.7 millimeters. And the device is a little thinner than the Steam Deck, but not by much. Alright, now let's take a look at weight comparison, and we're going to use Scaly for this. And the ROG Ally comes in at about 616 grams with no case or anything on it. Now the Steam Deck with a case on it comes in at a lot heavier at about 874 grams. And after holding the ROG Ally, I definitely feel that extra weight whenever I pick up the Steam Deck. Now, both the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck have front-facing speakers, so let's go ahead and test the audio quality of both of these devices, starting with the Ally. To me personally, I feel like both of these devices pass the audio test, and they are very similar devices, so let's take a quick look at why you would want to choose one over the other. And let's go ahead and start with the Steam Deck. This is the more budget-friendly of the options because it starts at $400 for the 64GB model. You also have trackpad support, which is good for first-person shooters, but also makes the user interface easier to navigate in desktop mode. It's more energy efficient, and there's a lot more community support due to Decky plugins and EmuDeck, and this is a bit more of a plug-and-play device because you could just download your games and start playing. And this device will top out at a 15-watt TDP, which means you're not going to get as much performance as the Ally, but it is a little bit more efficient in that battery draw. Whereas the pros for the ROG Ally is it's a Windows native device, so if you're more comfortable running Windows, you may be more tempted to grab a device like this. The screen itself is downright beautiful, and that refresh rate really does come into play as far as a smooth and clear experience. This device is also an ergonomic dream. The construction of the plastic combined with the form factor just make this device really comfortable to hold for longer play sessions, and the fact that it doesn't have trackpads actually makes it a little bit smaller, so it is a little bit easier for you to rest your hands while playing this device. And if you have $1,500 burning a hole in your pocket and you want a Switch-like experience where you have portable power on the go and you have more power when docked, you do have that eGPU compatibility, and you can go up to 25 watts TDP when not plugged in, so you are going to get slightly better performance between the TDP and the CPU if you don't mind sacrificing battery life along the way, or if you're going to play it plugged in anyway. So there are pros and cons to each device, and really you're going to get a great machine whether you decide to get a Steam Deck or an ROG Ally. But I found during the last few weeks since I've gotten the Ally, I have been reaching for that device more. And the two big factors as to why I've been doing that is because of the screen and the ergonomics. I just have a much more comfortable and much more enjoyable experience on the ROG Ally versus the Steam Deck. However, that doesn't invalidate the Steam Deck in my eyes, because that system has a lot more support and definitely still has some advantages over the Ally. However, there's another player I want to enter into the mix, and that's not necessarily this device that you see before me called the Neo Air, but it's for a device that is coming out that is very closely related to that, and that would be the Neo Air 1S. And Neo's devices are typically very overpriced. However, this particular device is now on Indiegogo with an early bird price of $7.99, which is exactly the same as the ROG Ally for this lowest model, except it is a lot more compact and only sports a 5.5-inch screen, but it is going to be an AMOLED screen, and you're also going to get a 7840U chip in it, and the rest of the specs are going to remain pretty much the same, except you are going to get a bigger battery in the 1S. And this is estimated to ship in August, which is just next month, so if you have an $800 budget and you are looking for something a lot more compact than what the Ally or the Deck has to offer, this may be another option for you. Another device worth considering would be the AYN Loki Max, which is also going to be a compact x86 handheld, and this is going to have a 6-inch display, and it's going to have a little bit of a weaker processor with the 6800U, which is still a very capable chip. And if you backed the AYN Odin campaign, they're going to be offering an early bird promotion for $125 off, but otherwise you're going to have an early bird promotion for $75 off, which puts this device at $700, which makes it not only cheaper than the ROG Ally, but a lot more compact and also cheaper than the Neo line of handhelds, and this could potentially be in your hands by the end of August depending on when you order it. So you have options out there as far as x86 handhelds that rival the ROG Ally in power, but it does need to be considered that you can walk into a Best Buy and pick up the ROG Ally right now if you were so inclined, whereas you would have to pre-order and wait for these other devices. And going back to the Steam Deck, if you order that from Valve, that could potentially be in your hands within a week because those are shipping out pretty quick. Now, the ASUS ROG Ally is capable of 3 TDP modes out of the box, with the ability to customize TDP settings per game if you choose, but I'm going to focus mostly on the factory settings, and we're going to start here with silent mode. And this is basically where I spend most of my time when using the Ally. I very rarely go into the other two modes because I find that I'm actually using this device to play games that are not as power hungry. And so a device like this is perfect for a retro gaming channel because it does allow me to play a lot of retro games. And those games are generally scattered between my Steam library as well as some emulation. And so this is where I've started to really fall in love with these x86 handhelds, is because it allows me access to both. And so the games you're seeing on screen now are all the lightweights, and a lot of these will run at the max refresh rate while keeping temperatures low as well as maximizing that battery life. So, when playing lightweight games like this, you can probably expect to get an average of 3 hours of battery life. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in this video. But before I do, I want to show you some consoles and games that you can emulate with pretty good success using the silent mode setting on the ROG Ally. Let's start with GameCube. So here we are playing Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, and we're getting a full 50 frames per second, and the APU is only pulling about 9 watts. You could see there's not really that much of a bottleneck on the CPU and GPU, and the temperatures are remaining cool at 52 degrees Celsius. And the battery's only pulling 13 watts of power, but if you went with a custom setting, you could probably get that even lower. And we're getting similar performance out of Pokemon Coliseum. We're getting about a 25% pull on the GPU with only about a 10% pull on the CPU, and temperatures are staying relatively cool, and the battery is pulling about 13, maybe 14 watts. So this will get you about 3 hours. It may get you a little more depending on how you tweak your settings. And let's take a quick second, turn the volume down to 0, and take a listen to that fan. And so the sound you're actually hearing is my air conditioner in the background in the other room. There is actually no sound coming out of the Ally's fan because it is managing the temperature quietly without kicking that fan on, hence the name silent mode. And it's very nice to be able to play this device and not have to hear that fan going off all the time. One of the amazing parts of this device is even at a silent mode TDP setting, you can do some light PS3 emulation. So we're taking a look at Puzzle Fighter 2 here, and this is pulling about 15 watts from the battery, but you could see it's only about a 9 or 10 watt TDP, and while we are getting a lot of pull on the GPU, the game is still performing pretty efficiently. And the same holds true for Turtles in Time Reshelled, proving that if you have some lightweight PS3 games, then you can keep the Ally in silent mode and still play PS3 games. And the same holds true for some light Switch emulation. So here I am playing the Pixel remaster of the original Final Fantasy with a full party of winners. And when I was creating my characters, I completely missed the opportunity to make my own character a thief. I made him a warrior instead, because that's what I typically play when I play the original Final Fantasy. But next time I start up a new game, I'm totally making myself a thief just based on the name ROG. Link's Awakening will also run in silent mode, and it will only pull 9 or 10 watts from the APU. And with Yuzu mods active, we can actually get a very good 60 frames per second without some of the small issues that kept this game back on the actual Switch hardware. So now we're going to do some testing using my favorite game, Final Fantasy XIV, and currently we're running this at 1080p in normal desktop mode, and we're running it in silent mode, and so we're getting about 9 or 10 watts being pulled from the APU, and you could see that the GPU is already starting to get up there. And so while the game is very playable in these settings, you notice we're only pulling about 30 frames per second because of that 1080p resolution. So there are a couple of things we can do here. We can up this to performance mode, and that will increase our frame rate. Now we're getting about 40 frames per second, and in less populated areas, we'll get about 60. But let's try something else here. We're actually going to take advantage of that FreeSync that comes with this screen and with this device. So first, let's go into our game settings, and we're actually going to drop the resolution to 720p at 120 hertz, and then we're going to make sure that the UI is scaled for 720p. And then we're going to go into our command center and we're going to turn AMD RSR to on. And so what that does is it's going to take our 720p resolution and it's actually going to upscale it to 1080p without taking that hit to efficiency and battery life. So you can see here, we're pulling the same wattage for the APU and the battery that we were pulling from silent mode before, but now we're getting an average of 52 frames per second as opposed to 30. And so if you're finding that you're not getting the performance you want in silent mode, dropping the resolution and turning RSR on could be a potential solution. However, there are going to be times where you need to bump the TDP into performance or turbo mode. So let's take a look at some games that would actually benefit from kicking things up a notch and going into performance or turbo mode. And we're going to start with Garfield Kart Racing, a game that was actually gifted to me from the Steam Machine community. And so, yeah, here I am playing as Odie using lasagna as a power up in a kart racing game. And so, at low settings, this will more than likely play just fine in silent mode. But I decided to kick things up into the highest graphics setting and I bumped it into performance mode. And so, we are getting better performance out of this odd little kart racer. Now, Hogwarts Legacy is an example of a game that might be a little challenging on a device like this. It will definitely play, but you can already tell at low settings here we are taxing the GPU and we are only getting about 48 frames per second, which is definitely playable because this game could play even at 30, but those temps are going up and we definitely have a lot of battery draw even in performance mode. And even if we bump things up into turbo mode, if we try to increase to a higher graphical quality, and then we go to apply those changes, the game is just going to yell at us that our computer actually can't handle those settings and frame rate is going to drop as a result and it's going to warn us away. But if we keep things at low settings and we bounce back into turbo mode, we are going to get a more steady frame rate and we are going to, for the most part, maintain those 60 frames per second. But notice how much this game is drawing on the battery, which means that you're more than likely only going to get about an hour if you play during this setting. So if you do plan on playing Hogwarts Legacy, you may just want to keep a charger handy. So if we stay in performance mode, we can actually bypass PSP entirely and go right to the HD version of Chains of Olympus for the PS3. And this is actually my preferred way to play this game, so the fact that I can play it with a 15-watt TDP and get 60 frames per second while playing a PS3 version of the game, that's pretty extraordinary to me. But the surprises don't end there. I'm actually able to emulate God of War 3 as well, as long as I kick things up into turbo mode. And while we're probably not going to get a stable 60 frames per second, and we are going to have graphical issues while shaders are caching, this is the first time since I started working on emulation devices that I've had something powerful enough to make this game playable. And with the Steam Deck, I was not able to ever get Pokemon Violet to run very well because that system only topped out at a 15-watt TDP. But here on the Ally in turbo mode, we can actually get a little bit more power, and there are going to be some graphical issues that come with emulating this game. But Pokemon Violet, whereas it has not been easy to emulate it in the past, it is now getting easier and easier thanks to more powerful handhelds as well as Yuzu optimizations, and this game is actually playable on the Ally. Also, just keep in mind, if you're going to do this, you should only be playing backups of games you've already legally purchased. Team Retro does not condone piracy in any way and does not want to be decapitated by any ninjas. Alright, we've been at this for a while, so let's start to wrap things up with what works well and what needs work. So let's start with the good. This is a system with a great screen, and the refresh rate and the resolution are really very top notch. Also, this is a powerful handheld. It does tend to trump the Steam Deck in raw power, and so there are going to be a few things that you could do on this that you can't do on the Steam Deck. You have that flexibility of Windows if you want to use the GOG store or the Epic store or stuff that isn't Steam in order to play your PC games. And I know I've said it a few times in this video, but this device is an ergonomic dream. I can hold this device for several hours without getting fatigue in my hands, and it is very good for longer play sessions. The material, the design, and the weight all contribute to making this a very playable handheld. I do like that you can replace the hard drive without taking the device apart too much. All you have to do is take the back off, which I did in a previous video. And the Armory Crate software, which I talked about in that previous video where I set up this device, is actually not bad. It's pretty responsive. You could use it as a launcher if you want, and it's fairly easy to navigate and to pull up that command center if you need to. All right, let's talk about what needs work, and we're going to start with the battery life. And that's unfortunately a problem with pretty much every x86 handheld that is out there. However, this device also, because it runs Windows, has a very difficult initial setup, and it also has that bugginess that comes with Windows that need to make sure that Windows Defender is keeping you from antiviruses, as well as some lack of efficiency tearing at your battery life. This device does come in at $799, which is more expensive than even the highest Steam Deck model. And so when you consider that the Steam Deck has been out for over a year and has better community support as well as better customer support overall, the ROG Ally suddenly becomes a tougher sell versus the Steam Deck, even though it is a more powerful and more ergonomic device. And so, what I'm hoping will happen in the future is the community will rally around the ROG Ally, and there will be some of those sweet, sweet enhancements that don't necessarily come from companies themselves, but come from developers and people that dedicate their time to wanting to make these devices even better. But I have to say, overall, I am very much enjoying my time with this device, and it is one of my daily drivers. And there's a lot about the ROG Ally that I haven't talked about, such as the eGPU slot, as well as other neat features like the LEDs around the joysticks, as well as how the face buttons are nice and big and very comfortable. And so the decision as to whether to buy this device, buy a different device, or wait is, as always, entirely up to you. But hopefully this video helped you with making that decision. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you have an ROG Ally? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? And is this a device that you are going to consider keeping in the long term? And if you want to continue the conversation, you can do that in both the Steam Machine and the Retro Handhelds Discord. That's where I typically hang out in between videos. And I have a home in the Retro Handhelds Discord now. There is a Team Retro section under the Community Hub. And special thanks to Stub and the Retro Handhelds community for welcoming me with open arms, and I look forward to our continued conversations. But for now, that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you found this video helpful in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.